Hello, friends. I'm Devendra, your host for the podcast, and you're listening to Life of a Researcher Stories Beyond DOI. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the second season of the podcast, Life of a Researcher Stories Beyond DOI. And in the first episode, we have with us Professor Tanvi Mankodi. Professor Tanvi is a faculty in OBHR at SP Jain Institute of Management and Research in Mumbai. She has done her PhD in Human Resource Management from IIM Ahmedabad. Apart from being a faculty at SP Jain, she also teaches human resource management at IIM Kozhikode, and that's how I got to know her. I attended her class and found that she has some unique approach towards a student, and I knew I had to interview her for this podcast. So through this interview, let's hope we get to know more as a person. So welcome, Professor Tanvi. Glad to have you with us on this podcast.
Thank you so much, Devendra. It's actually a delight to be here. Thank you so much.
So, ma'am, let's begin with the basic question. And this question would have surfaced in every researcher's life when they wanted to pursue a PhD. And that question is about the purpose. So, can you talk us through what was your thinking and what was your purpose behind pursuing a PhD?
Sure. So or rather the primary purpose was a very basic one that I wanted to be an academic, a full-time academic, and a PhD is a must for that. That was at least the initial reason for sort of searching as to how do I approach, where do I do a PhD, etc. from. But then it very quickly it moved on to understanding that PhD is not only just to tick off the basic requirement for an academic. It is more about getting deeper into a subject, actually the nuances of research, etc., which interested me. So before I applied to IIM Ahmedabad, incidentally, that was the only B school I applied to. This idea that I could pick up something like a very small thing in within this field of HR and OB, and then really pursue studying the details of it for a very long time, uh, and eventually become somewhat of an expert, I quote unquote, in that. That interested me a lot, and I'm an introvert, essentially, like a through and through introvert. So the idea of spending more and more time with books and studies, and rather than going out in the world and meeting people, seemed a lot more interesting also. So in that sense, it just research means you with your topic, your area, you keep thinking about it. And so someone like an overthinker like me, it make a lot more sense. It sort of gelled with what my personality is. So PhD in that way, it felt like a very natural thing to do. And why didn't I do it earlier, or that sort of a way? So long story short, more one, it was a job requirement, but more, it was more of a calling, that I would have done it eventually, even if the job did not require it. It started off as a job requirement, but it became much more than that. Yeah.
So, you did your PhD from IIM Ahmedabad, which is one of the premium institutes in the country. And with being the premium institute in the country, it has its own pressure. I mean, getting into that college is a difficult task. Then even completing the course is a difficult task. So what are the kind of pressures you faced as a student? I mean, some of them are actually acknowledged and some of them are not acknowledged. If you can throw light on those pressures and maybe how you coped with those pressures, it will be really helpful for a lot of students.
Yeah, sure. So you know that so somebody today also, if they ask me, we want to do a PhD, the first thing I ask them is, you have, or rather tell them that you have to accept that the next 5 years, once you get enrolled in the PhD, is it's going to take everything from you. There is no concept of life or work or you as a person. It's going to take everything from you. And it has its good points and the bad points as well. And I am Ahmedabad as a program is definitely difficult to get into, but I think it's more difficult to successfully get out of as well. So in that sense, because it's a full time program, uh, the rigor expected at the PhD level is obviously a lot more, and those are the obvious challenges. You are during the coursework, you're also competing for certain. We have to take certain credits with the the MBA students now, and we need to maintain our own academic level of a grade A or a grade B for the PhD requirements. No, imagine we are researchers. So, right, we are studying subjects because we need to know how it is to, be in MBA classes. But those are MBA students vying for placements. So, competition gets a lot tougher then. But yeah, so these are the rigor is one, of course, the obvious challenge. The second of a particular program, I think, irrespective of the institute, it is that it's a extremely solitary journey, right? So initially in the first 2 years of coursework, you have your peers, your colleagues, your classmates, etc., to sort of you have some interaction with them. So like in my case, I was the only one pursuing HR PhD in my year. The only with this one candidate. So all the second year classes, which were area specific, and the faculty were there, 3 hours, 4 hour classes. So it became a tad heavy, I think, for both for the faculty and me. And while it may seem that it's okay, you're getting such undivided attention, sometimes even that could become a pressure for you. Other than that, I think the other pressure or stress, which are, as you said, not spoken about so much, a full time program. Most of us are people who finished our post graduation, worked for a while, and then came into the program. So, after 26, 20, after we were 27, 28 years old, sort of a thing, where life in general is happening all around you. You're married, you have kids, your other friends are settling down. Other friends have disposable income enough that they are going on vacations or tours and enjoying life, and you are here that, oh, I can't do that. I have a submission of a term paper on a Saturday, or I have some conference I need to attend, or something or the other. So that sort of thing is you need to keep your head on quite tight on your shoulders, that it's okay, you're doing this for a purpose. And the other thing, which so there are just two more things. One is what I faced was this thing that, so I have been a academically strong candidate in school and college and everywhere, and and even if I wasn't, there are there are these trackers, right? You have exams, you have assignments, you have some sort of way to track your progress from year one to year two to year 10, whatever. PhD, there are no trackers, right? There is one proposal submission and one there is a final defense. So from year three to year five, I don't sort of have anything tangible to show. Oh yeah, research is going on. We can have paper publications and that sort of thing, but you don't have any tangible markers. You don't have that thing to show that are you on the right path. You can never. I mean, you can to certain extent, but at some point in during the PhD, I'm sure you would also face that you don't know for sure ये कब खत्म होने वाला है, right? And
Yeah.
when somebody asks you, "Arey, you've been here for 4 years. How long are you going to take?" You feel extremely annoyed. So I had this. I had because we were staying in campus. The maid very innocently asked me that, "Didi, यहाँ पे there are students who finish their course in 2 years, then some finish in 1 year. Why are you taking 5 years?" They're like, "What are you studying?" And I'm like, "Okay, how do I explain PhD to her?" So, and I was like, and then she was like, "Is it because you're married or because you're a woman that you take long time? And what is it? What are you taking so much time?" And I know some people are here since 7 years. And what happened? Did you fail? And then she's like, "You are almost every day at home. There are no exams. So what's going on?" So to boost my ego, I just told her that, all these people, the 2 years, 1 year, and all those people, I am preparing and learning to teach them. So that takes a longer time. I don't know whether she got that or not, but that's what I told her. And so, yeah, I think that sort of struggle is there. As I said, life's happening around, and you don't have anything to track your progress. So and it's a solitary journey. So it becomes sometimes. You get deluded by the idea, or you get a lot of these thoughts of when will this end or something like that. And personally, one of my stressors was, as in my life, personal life, I was going through a divorce, or rather an unhappy marriage that finally culminated into divorce the entire time of the PhD. While my coursework was going on, while I was expected to be top of my game of everything, the faculty and the campus gave were extremely considerate. wonderfully supportive during the entire time. But even the cost still demands certain things. So that was an additional thing for me. Two major life changing things happening at the same time. It affects you. So, but and I, in but because it's a long 4 to 6 years sort of a thing, the other classmates also I know they saw marriages, they saw childbirth, they saw divorces, they saw
Mhm.
breakups, they saw a lot of those things. So balancing that actual real life versus being in your PhD, that also, I think that was one of the biggest pressures as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, that answer to the maid was kind of. I mean, I can use that answer as well if somebody asks me. I'm sure the kind of social pressures
Yeah,
students go through, hearing you, they would identify with that.
yeah.
So, can you also share how did you cope with those pressures, and maybe going back, how differently you would have dealt with them?
Okay, so I'll take the easy one first, that which is so actually I have thought. So as I said, I'm an overthinker, so I ruminate a lot. Uh, I have thought about the stuff when we started out. I think so. From the time I got the call that okay, you've got. Incidentally, it was first April when I got the mail that oh, you've been accepted. So while the joy and celebrations are one side, I think in the next 3 months to follow before we joined, which is somewhere in mid June, I would say in retrospect, I could have prepared a little bit more, prepared myself for what was going to come. I think I did not do that. I sort of felt. So when I joined my MBA, I had not done any preparation. I mean, I know course in general, but you go with this thing that okay, you're going to study something. There are going to be classes, and then we'll figure out, right? That's how it's done. Because again, there are no textbooks to be read beforehand or anything like that. So I went in. I think I went in a little bit unprepared, that sort of a way. Uh, while everybody else, it seemed that everybody else already knew what was going to happen. I was a little bit left behind in that sense. um, and so that was so that initial couple of months, it added to that stress. Also, I'm a commerce student, and my undergrad and postgrad are all in management. So maybe I can blame it on the school system, but we have never been taught integration or derivatives. And I knew what the symbol of function means, but I never knew what it's been used for. And PhD coursework relies a lot on pure mathematics, not pure mathematics, sorry, but mathematics as a course and understanding modeling, etc. So I knew statistics, but not the level that was expected out of us. And that was initially a lot of issue because most of them were engineers, so for them this was basic, like this they could do it in
Mhm.
their sleep, and I was here trying to understand what integration actually means. um, right, so coming to the coping part, so I said one, the general pressures of the course. I think the biggest help is talking to the people around me. I did not do that for a long time because I got the imposter syndrome, as it's called. I got into it pretty early on. Maybe I'm the one made a mistake. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe engineer would have been better suited, and a lot of these maybes came on. And because I did not talk to anyone, I did not realize that a lot of others were also feeling something similar. That it's a
Mhm.
tough course, and so first 1 year got a lot into adjusting. But reaching out to my classmates, and I made some wonderful friends, that helped a lot in the in the general uh, rigmarole of things, that oh, this is not happening correctly, or what do I do, or there's just a stress, and it not being so much of solitary. Even once we started working on our own thesis, going out for chai, or talking to someone in the middle of the night during the campus, all those things helped a lot. Which is one. Second, of course, the support of family. Again, I was, because the marriage and divorce was also going on, and at that time, my parents were also in the US for some time, so immediate family was not in the city for a long time. But eventually, they did. I mean, so I am a Gujarati, so then Ahmedabad. Then most of my relatives are in and around Ahmedabad. So that sort of support
Mhm.
system also brought in a lot of help. And my parents were, I think, the third year of my PhD, they were back from the US. They were there for the last, they were there for previous 2 years. Um, in the later part of the last 1.5 years, when writing the thesis and data collection, all those were going on, them they were, my parents were, or a family were the biggest anchor, that okay, you do what you finish your PhD, that's all you focus on, everything else we'll take care of, with even the simple aspect of cooking, or whatever chores there are. So I stayed with them more, rather than on the campus. um, my parents shifted to Ahmedabad for my PhD for the last 6-8 months, so that I could finish it, and that was that was the biggest blessing I had. So coping with everything that was going around, the self doubts of not being able to finish the PhD, the self doubts of the divorce and everything else. That was my coping mechanism. And the third thing again was just in general, it's a very small little thing, but taking some time out, I compulsorily took out some time to not do anything academic. So
Mhm.
maybe just go and visit a cafe, or see a play or movie, or read something. So Harry Potter is my comfort book. I am an adult and I have no problem admitting it. It's my comfort book. The seventh one especially, I've read it around 7 times. I was reading it during the sitting for the interview for FP PhD as well, because there was nothing more I could prepare. I was just waiting for my turn. I was reading the book at that time also, and it's just my comfort read. So books, so, yeah. So friends, family, and books, that have been my major reasons of coping. So this is my observation. I may be completely off base, but I think those of us who do this PhD or into research most of us have these similar characteristics of being introverts, or
Mhm.
at least being very comfortable in our own space, being alone, which is great for the work that we are doing. But sometimes we get a little bit too engrossed and sort of forget the whole world that exists. And then the whole world cannot be blamed for not sort of keeping ties with us. So I think reaching out once in a while, uh, it unless, I understand that, oh, you have a submission, or oh, you have still not finished this, but there will always be something unfinished. But if possible, let's not miss certain moments of human interaction. I think, just and reach out, help out, even if there's someone who absolutely doesn't understand at all anything that you are doing. Even then, just talk, just reach out, or just hear someone talk. I think it sometimes, or most of the time, that helps out a lot to reach out to anyone.
Well, that's a great point and an observation. I think most of us are introverts who are getting into the PhD because we are quite fine with working on our own. And yes, I think that point which you mentioned about reaching out to people, I think that should be helpful to many of them, many of us actually.
Yeah.
So, since you spoke about the PhD thesis part, can you also talk about how did you decide on your PhD thesis topic? And I mean, some of that PhD thesis learning would have culminated into research papers, and I'm sure a lot of it would be with you as your personal learning. So, if you can reflect on them and share with us.
Sure. So I'm from the area of HR. I've worked for some time in HR, and I've seen the good that HR can, on theory, do. Some good that HR actually did, in at least in my organization, but a lot of issues that actually HR created rather than solving them. And of course, then there were some issues that HR did not touch upon at all, and was supposed to. So, in that sense, my guiding force behind doing a research in HR, even teaching HR for that matter, is that how do we sort of make it so that we solve the problems, and what are the problems, etc., that face. So interpersonal behavior, relationships, all those sort of things, that fascinate me. And in the second year of our coursework, we have these area specific courses. So everything, so within HR, we have a course on foundations of HR, then employee relations, international HRM, qualitative, quantitative techniques. So you go into very deep into specific recruitment planning, performance, etc. So one such subject was employee relations, which my guide was facilitating. So that sort of forged that bond also, because choosing a guide is extremely important. And I mean, my guide has been extremely instrumental in getting my PhD done, like actually done. So he taught us two courses, out of which one of this was employee relations. We're talking about decent work agenda, labor relations, some aspect of bullying and that sort of thing, harassment. So that's that sort of basically employee relations of blue collar, white collar, all those sort of things. Usme I came across this paper on incivility, which is rude and disrespectful behavior, and we started talking. And he gave a lot of these brilliant, because he's worked for a long time in HR, and he's known to be a turnaround specialist for HR for organizations. So he shared these brilliant insights on how certain things work, and how a simple interaction could turn into a spiral of anger and mistrust, etc., just because someone was rude to you. Yeah, and as a person, or as a child, I have been mildly, I would put it, but I have been a victim of certain amount of bullying because of certain things. I have seen. So now, if I put it in research parlance, I have seen petty tyrants as bosses. I have seen, indirectly, my boss, not my boss, because I was in HR and you have data on the organization, I have seen these things in action. So that interested me a lot. Rudeness in general, which is something sometimes most of us don't even clock in. Okay, this is not, this is not how it was supposed to be. And especially in the workplace, we don't clock it for a very long time, and it does have a lot of detrimental impact. So I wanted to study that, and that sort of brought me to this topic of incivility in the workplace. And that became my thesis area, the antecedent consequences. But another, I mean, as my guy suggested, we could not only we should talk about the role of HR in all of these things, at a systemic level. How what is its role, etc. So that became one of the important variables. So even today, when I study these behaviors, dark side of behavior is something which I'm extremely interested in, but not from the aspect of just studying the dark side, but what can we do about it? Because it's most people say that you become the area that you research in. So it's thoda sa, it sort of become a downward spiral if you're into too much of negative behavior. In fact, a lot of people told me, don't get into this. You're not made for this, and there'll be a lot of negative thing. But I only said that I'm surrounded by, or at least I know how it feels to be a part of rudeness or bullying or things like that. So that's why I'm studying. I'm not studying the dark phenomenon. I'm rather studying how to solve it. Yeah. And there is there is this movie, I'm sure you heard about it, The Dark Knight, the Batman movie by Nolan. So I have not read Batman comics. I have no idea about them other than the three Nolan movies that I've seen. And in Dark Knight, the character of the Joker, I still say today very truthfully that he is that character is the inspiration behind what I wanted to study. The philosophical discussions that are there in the movie, that basically, you can't have somebody who's only good or only bad. Good and bad exists between us. Again, this is also comes from Harry Potter as well, but it's more from the Joker, that sometimes the situation make us act in certain ways that are evil or dark. So we need to embrace the dark side as well as the good side of our things. And that sort of thing, that interested me a lot, and then it got sort of channeled into research via this. So anything which is in the dark side of behavior, so counterproductive work behavior and that sort of thing. And I'm not extremely comfortable with dealing with extremely sensitive topics of violence or sexual harassment or something like that. I tried to study that, but I couldn't. Just beyond one interview with someone, I couldn't go on. So, yeah, that was off the table. Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So it's quite interesting how we observe that becomes a research question, and that research
yeah.
question creates learning for ourselves. Well, that brings me to kind of understanding that as researchers, we need to be observing and also at the same time absorbing those things
Mm-hmm.
to come up with better research questions.
Sure.
So, since you spoke about your PhD guide who had played an instrumental role uh,
Yeah.
in your whole research journey,
Hmm.
can you speak about the role models you have had right from your childhood? Who were your role models in the beginning, and who are your role models right now? And what have been your memories with them?
So, all right. So, see, Devendra, I'll be very honest. Don't subscribe to this notion of a role model.
Mhm.
Even from my childhood, for the simple reason that I had this. I mean, again, it might be a naive observation as a child, but I had this discussion with my grandfather. I was very close to him, so he used to be a union leader. So he was that fighting spirit, etc., and he used to say this, that so he used to talk a lot about equality and equality between management and workers and his stories and everything. So he was a part of a very big us time pe a big company called Sindhya Steam. Now it's no more, a shipping company based in India. And he was a union leader for that, and he used to say that you should not be scared of anyone, you should be confident as long as you are in the right and true and that sort of sense. But basically the point of all this, even I have the privilege of having a lot of these discussions with my father as well. um, what they were always trying to say, that just because we are from a particular, say, income group or job position or social strata also for that matter, we're not the bosses, we're the employees and middle class wala thing. We shouldn't feel inferior, and just because somebody is in a position, you don't feel they are not superior because they're that. So that is one. I mean, I promise there is a logic to what I'm saying. The second part being that, as any kid would, I idolized my parents a lot
Mhm.
growing up. I still do, but at that time they were like the be all end all for everything, more than so that thing of God being parents being the versions of God. That I still believe true in my head, but I also realized growing up that it's unfair to them, because when you put someone as a role model, at least I sort of detach them from being people. Yeah, so I
Mhm.
couldn't. So I had this notion that, oh, they are the perfect parents, and then you realize, no, there is a chink in the armor, but that can't be do. It to mummy
Yeah.
papa hai. They can't do
Yeah.
this. Right? But they are people. They can fight with each other. They can make mistakes and that sort of thing. So from that, so what I sort of, as I said, these discussions with my grandfather and parents and
Mhm.
everything, went to this, that when I say somebody is a role model, I can't put them on a pedestal because it creates a distance. But I do, but I have. Okay, so I observe certain traits in certain people that I think I should have, or I
Mhm.
admire, or I respect them for it. Now it could be
Mhm.
anyone, and I learn a lot from even my students, or people I interact with, even for that maid, for that matter, who is
Mhm.
curious enough to know.
Mhm.
Nobody cares that much, that he cares that. What is the problem? Why should she care whether I am for 1 year or a 5 year thing? Or maybe she cared that her contract, like, should be paid for the next 5 years. But my point being, so I have earmarked certain researchers in the field that I'm interested in. I have certain professors whose style I like. I like certain aspects of certain students.
Mhm.
So I try to imbibe those. So in terms of role models, that is, I think certain traits are role models rather than people. Um, to be fair to them and to myself as well. So um, so my guide is, I mean, as I say, he has been an amazing influence, and I am just thankful that he agreed to be my guide despite a lot of trouble from my side that I made, breaks and everything. So from him, the biggest thing I've learned is the patience to deal with someone while reminding them of the work that they are in. So he knew I was upset. He gave me that much space, but he was there to remind that, you are here for a purpose. That if you decided to do this thesis, then you have to do it. So he has been amazing in that, the support that he's lent. Some of the professors that I've come across, some of the researchers, some of my colleagues also went through certain personal issues during the PhD, but they were resilient enough to finish the PhD, and with flying colors. Some of them got awards for their thesis, some got published very well. So those sort of things. So I admire their traits. I see them, I observe them, I see what I can imbibe. Yeah, so I do that. So every Teachers Day, I actually thank a lot more people who are not officially teachers, but they have been
Mhm.
for me. So yeah.
Well, you have been patient with your students as well, because you would tell them that it's okay to say that I don't feel like answering today, or
Yeah.
it's okay if you want to keep your screens off,
Yeah.
your cameras off. So, is that the philosophy behind that, or if you can elaborate more on that aspect from where it comes?
Yeah, sure. So thank you. I'm glad that I could come across. So one was during COVID online virtual teaching. See, everybody was going through the nonsense that the pandemic has been in different ways, right? So now I can't do anything to allay that, or and I don't believe in this just saying things for the sake of it. I'm honest. I don't like to sugarcoat things, but um, honesty with politeness. But it just felt that if this is the least I can do, that okay, you don't need to be under any pressure. At least from my side, I don't want the students to be under any pressure. If the if the I, I don't know if it made I didn't know at that time if it made any sense when I told them that you could keep your screens off. I didn't know if it was that important enough also, or whether they cared whether I said that or not. But from my end, I wanted to say that I'm trying to create a safe space. um Again, no barrier between, just because I'm a faculty I know something more than you don't or something like that. It's just a matter of roles and will happen. So for me, creating that safe space, whether it is a physical classroom or an online one, has been extremely important. I've been teaching since 2011, and I've always maintained that. So in fact, during the earlier pre-pandemic classes, the every last class 15-20 minutes, I used to get chocolates for everyone and tell them that we are ending. Let's end on a sweet note and give them some sort of gyan. Like being an academic, you get into this thing that I have a captive audience. I need to talk. Gyan, and just in terms of this is what I think. This is what I wanted to be told when I was, let's say, graduating or something, or this is what it would have helped if I knew certain things. Um, so, and they're students, they're adults, they can take it or leave it. So that safe space, creating that safe space has been extremely important. And during pandemic, I thought became all the more important. That don't worry about the chota things. Uh, so yeah, so the no video, no camera rule or something like that, or any rule for that matter. See, we are all human beings. I have a job to do. Doesn't mean I always want to do it, but I have to get up and teach. But as a student, you are inundated by so many things. There's a
Mhm.
constant pressure of class participation, attendance, assignments, and I mean, I understand the whole thing of it. I have been a student, so I understand the whole thing of it. I've seen the rigor in Ahmedabad, so I can imagine what other students are feeling. So as I said, the least I can do is tell you that it's all right if today you are not in a mood to say something. It's perfectly fine. You don't always have to be under that pressure. It's fine to be you. That's just have some breathing space. So that concept of safe space, and I hope to do that in any course that I teach. Now we are of course moving more towards the offline mode, but yeah. So that's the basic philosophy that. I'm not a threat. I'm not a threat. I'm just here to facilitate a course, and let's yeah. That's what.
Well, thanks for doing that, because initially I've observed in the class that initially there was less discussion, but as the classes went on, the
Yeah,
discussion
yeah,
kept increasing. People started participating, and I think they felt that they were safe and they could say, I mean, they were free to say that,
yeah,
no, I can't speak today.
yeah,
And those who were willing, they were speaking up.
yeah,
So thanks
yeah.
for doing that.
Thank you. I'm glad it went through.
Mhm.
It came through. Sorry.
So let's come to one of the aspects of our careers or our life that we usually don't speak about. That is failures. You know,
Yeah,
failures, they are one of the most underrated aspects of our life. I mean, they provide us huge learning, but we don't discuss enough. Uh,
absolutely.
so, can you share some of the failures from your life and what they have taught you uh, as a professional or as a person?
Sure,
Uh,
sure. Yeah. Um. So this it's a, I mean, we could talk about it for hours and still it won't be enough, because you very rightly said we don't talk about failures, we don't acknowledge the fact that you can fail and it's all right. Fail probably at an academic level, fail at just, you attempted something, you did not get the desired outcomes and that sort of thing. Failure, or it also in terms that it's okay to give up sometimes, it's okay to leave some things. Just because you've sunk a lot of effort into it doesn't mean you have to see it through. Personally, so again, coming back to the thesis, PhD wala time itself, I was in a place where everybody was an overachiever, right? Everybody was a scholar, a topper, or had these amazing credentials. So everybody was under pressure, right? So there is no room for being average there, because everybody is above average. So it sort of messes up with the calculations. And I'm not just talking about my PhD class, the MBA students, the faculty, just this whole environment is of people who have been excellent, scholastically excellent. So in that thing, where the risk, or rather the impact of failure, seems a little bit higher. Hence you'll see a lot of these discussions on imposter syndrome also in PhD, as well as the stress which makes people do a lot of um, harmful things as well. Uh, so for me, that the first thing, the first in rather the thing that I remember was again this mathematics wala thing. It just, I felt very angry at the fact that this was not even my fault. I mean, this was something that was, I was not educated on, and then yet I am being expected to know it sort of a way. And this is not my fault, and I can't blame the system. I mean, it's not a, how do I sort of cope with that? So that was one. The second was this constant fear of not being able to match up to the expected standards, right? But and personally, I have this, for a very long time I struggle with this idea that maybe I was not good enough for my ex-husband, or maybe I was not the perfect wife, or which, because of which this was happening. So I failed my marriage because that's what everybody else was telling me, from my interaction with the ration card office person asking me, oh, how did you get divorced so early? And people are very, very cruel. The society is extremely cruel to anyone who doesn't fit into their normal mode of doing things. Normal being quote unquote, whatever is goes on as normal. Because I've heard a lot of these stories about people staying in marriages which are abusive, emotionally and physically, for various reasons. Um, so coming, my failure, one was that. Second was, this whole thing of with within PhD also, there are my classmates who were publishing, who were attending conferences, who were doing extremely well, and here I was just struggling to sort of make ends meet in terms of, oh, I have done this submission, I've done this deadline, and now I have to go back and see what is the court date for my divorce, or I've gone to go back and see that I've got some health issues because of the constant stress. So how do I manage that? And how do I manage my family also, telling them that I'm okay? I can't, I don't want to leave the course, and all those sort of things. I think it came with a lot of deal of um, coaching one's own self, that you accept that these are your strengths, these are your weaknesses, okay, and let's focus on the strengths. Not worry too much about ठीक है, everybody else is publishing, ठीक है, I will do it eventually. Okay, abhi it's not the right time to pressurize myself with a lot of extra things, because it is an extra thing for that matter. Doing my thesis is what was the number one priority. Finishing it in a good way, something that I'm proud of. That was more important. Eventually, publications would happen. Eventually, conferences would happen, and I would go up to there. I have been, a public speaker all my life, in school, etc. I'm never scared of. I actually spoken to a crowd of 1,000 people, compared for an event and that sort of thing. But somehow, for those 2 3 years, while the PhD and divorce and everything was happening, I lost my confidence to talk. I couldn't talk even in front of 3 people. I felt, what if I failed? Somebody laughed at me. So I did. That's why I did not attend conferences. Because if I were asked to present a paper and what if I fumbled, what if I was not good enough, that thing constantly kept in my head. What if I am not good enough? And sometimes even today it sometimes I get these things of what if I'm not good enough. So as I said, acknowledging that failure is all right. Yeah, understanding needs to be there for life. While we celebrate accomplishments, we need to be mindful of the fact that saying that it's okay. Hence this also this thing of creating a safe space for students. It's okay to not always be on top of your game. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so Professor Tanvi, we will finish this podcast with one last question. So you have shared about your life quite frankly,
Yeah.
uh, and I mean PhD is just one part of our life, and the journey of the researcher continues. Uh, so, as a researcher, what kind of difference you want to make to your society through your work, through your profession, or as a person?
Yeah. Oh, that's quite a deep question. Okay, so I have done generally I do more of qualitative research because I think it gives in a lot of these rich insights. So during the thesis data collection and subsequently other research that I've done, you get to hear these stories, right? People want to talk,
Hmm.
and I'm saying please talk, right? That's what I'm here for. And you get to know these amazing experiences that people have, the good and the bad. Amazing in the sense they amaze me, they fascinate me. Good and bad, and again, the same way that you are asking, we ask them, how did you cope with that? How do you determine all of those
Hmm.
things? So, one way I want my research to impact is by bringing these stories in a way that more people know about it. So, A, they realize that we are not alone, and B, we realize that how much of the harm and the good that we are creating. So I was taking a course with I was teaching a course with some working professionals, and I told them that there is this aspect of dark side of leadership, and there are certain ye hota hai, wo hota hai, that sort of thing, and they were like,
Hmm.
and we know we've had these managers from hell, we know these things and we know that. And then one person quietly said, ma'am, I was somebody like that. And now I realize just by one of the stories that I was sharing, and he said, I realized that I have actually done that to my employees. And I never realized that I was being disrespectful because I did not intend. But that doesn't mean the actions were not that. And incidentally, rudeness is something which has an ambiguous intent to harm. So he said a couple of people did quit my team, and I am now a lot more stabilized. He was 52 years old. He said, I'm a lot more stabilized now, but I do realize that sort of thing. And that aha moment that happens,
Hmm.
I don't know what he did after that because the scope
Hmm.
of my course did not cover that, and we did not keep in touch. But the fact that my research kahin koi pad ke will someday realize that this is something that has happened to me, so this is how I can cope with it, or this is something that I have done, and this is something, and the impact that I've created, and this is how I can resolve it. I think in the larger sense, that's what I want to do for the society or for academics or anything like that. Do something which is worthwhile, which makes a difference, which somebody will read and say and go that, oh, okay, this makes sense, or this is interesting. Let's talk about it. And I also have this hidden agenda. Or so when you tell me that I speak of my life, I have spoken about my, so in my classes, talking about divorce, talking about failure, I've made it a point in the last 3 4 years. I don't want those things also to be a taboo. I want conversations around them because I've seen people just shrink away when you say you're divorced.
Hmm.
And I actually seen someone say that, oh, my husband died when I was 29 years old, and there was a big discussion and everything about it. And I said, oh, I was divorced when we were 30, and people went quiet, just silent. Nobody knows what to say. Do you mourn it? Do you celebrate it? Do you say congratulations? Nobody knows that. Similarly, even during research, when you talk about especially these dark side behavior or any research for that matter, but for my research, I have this hidden agenda to sort of tell people that this is happening. Okay, whether we admit it or not, this is happening. So let's talk about it, and then let's go to the more important stage of how can we do something about it. And the second hidden agenda is that HR is extremely important. I truly believe that. And in such sort of things, I think HR has a very crucial role. So let's talk about that role. Let's talk about that aspect of HR, of how it can contribute. So yeah, that's how I plan to impact practice and society.
So, Professor Tanvi, thank you for sharing so much from your life. I'm sure, I mean, this is kind of lesson for a lot of us, and it's a great learning. With this, we'll end this podcast, and thanks again for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Devendra. I mean, it's absolute honor, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Friends, this was Professor Tanvi from SPJN Institute of Management and Research. She was quite frank in sharing various bittersweet experiences from her life. The beauty is that she has not allowed those bitter experiences to get to her heart, but turned them into a positive spiral and have tried to create safe spaces so that people around her could express and be themselves. Well, I would like to leave you with a question. What are we doing with our bitter experiences? How can we turn them into a positive spiral? Now, think about it and let me know through your voice messages. So, goodbye until we meet next time with stories from one more researcher. Have a great day.